Declaring a public health emergency will help us break through long-standing barriers impeding financial literacy education in the public school system. Still to this day, after 12 years in school, kids will graduate unable to make even basic financial decisions. They won't know how to get a job. They won't know how to manage, save, and grow their money. After 12 years in school, no kid will graduate with this knowledge from the public school system, which is sad. Now, we've seen a lot of progress in terms of legislation. About half states offer financial literacy education, but of all the states that now mandate it, zero of the programs meet minimum education standards. Basic things like having trained qualified educators, performative assessments, clear objectives and curriculum. None meet those basic fundamental concepts that other subjects enjoy, right? These are just minimum education standards. And none will graduate able to make even the most basic financial decisions. Things like moving out on their own. They won't leave with a budget for that. They won't leave with a usable resume. They won't leave with a clear career plan or path to earn money. They'll be missing these basic components. Even they won't know what to do when the flood of credit card offers hits them when they turn 18 years old. Now, we can address those by through a public health emergency because there are serious barriers impeding meaningful financial literacy legislation. There's three really top barriers that I see. I'll address these right now because these are what's limiting that. So the states that have the highest standards, let's say, that are still well short, but the highest standards require 1 semester of financial literacy education. While that may sound good, they spend 10,000 other hours on other topics, more than 10,000 hours on other topics, and yet 1 semester is only equal to 50 hours of education on personal finance. And it's a very complex topic. 50 hours is equal to 1 work week. And one of the biggest restrictions to getting more education, higher rigor financial education, is the time, right? Because there's some barriers that schools face that are somewhat self-imposed, but they're barriers they face nonetheless. And this is where a public health emergency can help. One of the key barriers is college admission standards. Now, these standards were developed in the late 1800s, 1892 to 1894, the Committee of 10. They decided to standardize topics that were taught at the high school level because people would enter college at all different skill levels. Now, back then it made sense because the people that went to school, about 3% of the populace, and they were rich, wealthy elite for the most part, right? And sure, they needed to know things like literature and these other topics that might be good for the higher, socioeconomic status. But for the lay person that wasn't go to college, a lot of the subjects that they required don't make sense today. 130 years later, we're still teaching the same 5 core topics: English, math, science, social studies, and foreign language. Same 5. 130 years later, after all this innovation, back in those horse and buggy days, now we have major transportation, computers, AI. It's completely changed, and yet college admission standards have remained the same. Second, we have high schools focused on just teaching to the test, mainly the SAT. They're so hyper focused on that because that's where a lot of their funding, their ranking, and their prestige comes in with this SAT test, which again is very outdated. About 50% of that test is math related. And if we look at the jobs out there, only less than 6% of people need higher education math in terms of algebra 2. They don't need it. Very few people need that. And so it disenfranchises over 90% of the students. In fact, most students won't even need any algebra or geometry in their life after school. Now, basic algebra like solving for unknown variable that's taught in the 7th and 8th grade, most of the time, yeah, you need that. But anything more advanced, most people will never need. So that's the second thing impeding that is high schools really focus on teaching to that test. And the third thing is lack of funding. Now, when these states do mandate financial literacy education, typically it is a unfunded mandate. What does that mean? Well, politicians say, hey, schools, you need to teach kids this. The schools say, okay, great. Where's our money? Where's our resources? Where's our teachers? And they say, you get nothing. Figure it out. So then the schools, the school administration has to go into, try to get money from other ingrained departments. It's a tough battle, and oftentimes financial literacy loses. So, again, the three top challenges to have meaningful financial literacy education in schools is college admission standards, teaching to the test, and lack of funding. Now, a public health emergency can dismantle all of those really in one fell swoop. It has very big powers to make meaningful change in a entrenched and outdated academic system. And some of the things that we could see and hope for would be to immediately change college admission standards to be more inclusive and to prepare kids for the real world. To immediately change testing to that SAT test and a focus on that, to preparing kids for life on their own, to be independent, self sufficient, contributing members of society. That should be the goal of schools in my book. It could also transform the funding landscape as well, mobilizing people and getting resources to these schools and making sure kids are getting the education they need to live a healthy and happy life, right? And now we've seen, as a case study, COVID-19 is a great case study for this. Now, don't hold on there. I know they made a ton of mistakes. I don't agree with a lot of what happened. But one thing I did notice, and the reason we're really pushing this public health emergency for financial instability, was rapid change happened in the school system that hasn't been seen in over a century, right? Rapid change happened. So it has a very positive potential. And what we saw with COVID-19, again, they made a lot of mistakes, but we saw rapid change. They were able to mobilize people and infrastructure very quick, get kids the resources, tablets, and other education tools at home, shift from in person to online classes very quickly, get food service to those students at their homes when they needed that, right? They're able to mobilize and take swift, effective action because they had this pressure to make sure that kids were happy, healthy, and safe, right? And that was their idea. Again, I don't agree with everything there, but the end goal for us is we saw a lot of potential to make sure our kids are protected, and money is a directly impacts our kids' health. If we look across the board, every area of our children's life is impacted by money. Their health, their happiness, their relationships, their ability to live a fulfilling life, it directly impacts their health and overall well being. The CDC lists 5 social determinants of health. Money is a dominant and significant factor in all of those areas. So declaring a public health emergency is important. It will help protect our kids and be a proactive solution to this real epidemic this country is facing, with about a third of the country in a financially unstable position. This means they're worried about paying those bills, getting food on the table, wondering where they're going to sleep in many cases. I don't want that for our kids. It is a public health emergency, and addressing it in the public school system is a proactive, long term approach that can have a net benefit to our citizens and our taxpayers. Please join us in our efforts. We're launching this campaign during United for Action Week. We want your involvement. We'll put links in below. I appreciate your support. Let's do this for the kids. We need to make massive change. Again, the school system hasn't changed in over a century. It's time for major reform, and let's spearhead that with ensuring our kids get a financial education.